Greetings viewers, I am Eric the Car Guy. Thank you so much for tuning in. So today is a promised video to you at the end of part 2 of the rear disc brake conversion on the GMT 400 truck, which is this guy behind me, also known as Dad's truck. I stated that I would have a test drive video and some additional information for you. This is that video. Now I'll link those other videos down in the description so you can get caught up and up to speed if this is the first one that you're watching. But in addition to that test drive that covers some of those questions that I'm sure have come up by now, I also go over the rear suspension and torque those bolts and things like that down there, and at the end I try to see if I'm going to need to have my drive shaft shortened or not. So by the end of this video we'll have answers to lots of questions. Maybe we'll create some more questions, I'm not really sure, but either way I'm glad you're here, and I'm going to stop talking and we'll get to the action right now. Now that we've got the brake lines and everything all run, I'm going to reconnect the drive shaft. In order to do that, I'm going to have to loosen the U-bolts. I also have new U-bolts, so I'm going to take the opportunity to replace those U-bolts. And hopefully my guy at McGaffey's was correct, and all I need to do is install the drive shaft. Either way, we're installing U-bolts in the drive shaft now. Right now. Real quick. As you can see, I put the wheels on. That's one of the things that was suggested to me by the tech at McGaffey's. Also, when I ran everything down, I mentioned this in the last video, when I ran everything down with the impact while it was up in the air, I sort of locked the suspension into position, and I'm now going around and loosening things, and they seem to be dropping down a little bit because I want to torque everything while it's on the ground and actually torque it to spec instead of just running it down with an impact. I don't know if you saw that, but that dropped down a bit when I did that. So it is having an effect. All right, let's see if the drive shaft connects now. Just for the heck of it, I also disconnected the shocks because these are shorter shocks than were on here to begin with. But as you can see, they extended past the holes that they were in, so it wasn't the shocks that were holding things up. Since these aren't doing anything, I'm just gonna hook them back up. Let's see if this works. Well, it's better in that it doesn't look like it's going to push the pinion around, but I'm still going to have to drop this down. They're not going to go right in. Don't let me forget to torque those bolts on the leaf springs. Well, that dropped down a little more than expected. These new U-bolts are way more heavy duty than the old ones. Just gonna loosen this side, not take these all the way out yet. I'm just going to let it down a bit so that I've got some wiggle room to install the drive shaft. These are lock nuts, so they'll go on like this. So what I'm doing now is I want to make sure that these bolts are straight up and down, or close to it. That's not what I wanted to happen. These are 80 foot-pounds, and I'm just gonna walk up the rest of the way to my final torque. I'm doing like 3 turns on each. Trying to make sure I have like an equal amount of threads on each one. So I don't want one of these to have like more threads sticking down than the others. I want them all to be as even as I can make them. That's the end of my transmission jack for a little while. Well, the drive shaft is now connected. So what are we doing now? Well, we're gonna put the wheels on. I'm gonna lower it down. I'm gonna torque all that stuff on the leaf springs, 80 foot-pounds, 81 I think it was. When it's on the ground, then we'll take it out for a test drive. Check out the new gears, check out the brakes, and how it's lowered in the rear. It's gonna look a little silly, but it'd be nice to see it on the ground again. It's been a while. Not gonna bother with the centers for now. I know I'll be back. And I do have centering rings for these. Once I get to that final assembly point, that's when I'll implement those. And I do have my new lug nuts. Also waiting for final assembly on that. You might remember all that transmission fluid I lost. I know I lost a quart. I'm replacing this transmission anyway. So I'm just gonna dump this cheap quart in here. If it's too much or too little, so what? Get a new transmission anyway. I'm glad I didn't slam this thing into the weeds, because doing this would require a great deal more effort. There's a faster way. This part's taking forever. Get my ratchet, snug it up, and then torque it. I should have been trying to guess to see how close I could get to the actual torque to test my human torque wrench. This is where a 4-post lift would come in handy. Well, that's done. I do like the brake pedal feel better, because before I used to be able to sit on it and I used to be able to make it slowly sink to the floor. Now it's going down about halfway and stopping. And I believe according to the service manual it said it needed to be like 5.5 inches off the floor to be acceptable. But that said, we've certainly modified it from stock with an ABS delete and everything else. Rear disc brakes, all that stuff. Maybe it's just something I need to get used to. Let's see if we can make 11Zs. We won't spray rocks all over Brian's car. We'll spray rocks all over the white car. Who cares about that thing? Well, as long as I don't break the windows. Does have better get up and go. Still sucks, but it's better. That's the gearing. There were 308s before, now they're 373s. And I do feel a bit of a, sort of, that transmission sucks. I can't wait till that's gone. But brakes, 3, 2, 1. Unlock up or anything, it's stopped. I almost wish that I would have done the ABS delete and checked it first before I did the rear disc brake conversion. Then I wouldn't have to mess with all that junk back there. But they do seem better. I'd hit them more, but there's somebody behind me and I don't want to do that to them. But as far as the way the suspension feels good back there. I don't hear any noises or anything. Now what I've got to do is I've got to listen for any noise coming from the rear end. With this loud exhaust, that's kind of difficult. But I don't really hear anything yet. I hear something there when I let off the gas on coast. hear something there while it's coasting, like a wee. But going over the tracks, that rear end feels solid. All I did was move the leaf spring and replace the dampers, so it should be better. Well, bushings too. Forgot about those. There is noise on coast, and I've tried to position the camera. It doesn't seem to have an abnormal pinion angle, but what I'd like to do when I get back to the shop is see if I can remove the drive shaft without having to, you know, disconnect U-bolts or anything like that, because if I'm not, I'm just going to shorten the drive shaft, because I don't have to mess with that every time. And you have to keep in mind that the transmission has been swapped, the drive shaft has been swapped in this. That may be coming into play with this. You may not have to deal with that, but I am. And I think at the end of the day, like I said, if I can't get the drive shaft off easily, I think it's time to send that off to be shortened just a little bit. For now, let's see if I can reproduce that noise for you. And I don't hear any noise when I turn. Like when I first put the posi in the, well, I don't want to call it a posi. When I first put the limited slip in the Ford, I noticed when I would take turns, it would kind of hop, it'd feel kind of tight. This differential's not doing that. All 200 horsepower, maybe. There's the noise on coast. It's not accelerating. I hear kind of a wah. I'm very much looking forward to the new engine and transmission. But as far as the way the rear suspension feels, awesome. As far as the way the brakes feel, acceptable. Was it worth the effort and money that I put into it? Now, one thing is super important and that I was concerned about with the, you know, little bit of backlash that I had extra was a clunk when going from like park to reverse, reverse to drive. No clunk at all. Well, maybe there, but not coming from the rear end. So this is going to be my test. I'm going to attempt to remove this drive shaft. If I'm unable to do so, I'm going to, when I take the transmission out, commit to have the drive shaft shortened. And given from what I looked at in the past, probably going to take like 1 to 2 inches out of it. You don't want to go too short because then it'll fall out of the back of the transmission, obviously, but also with it being like this, if it's being forced up in the back of the transmission or putting undue stress on the new gears and everything back here, none of these things are desirable to me. So we'll change that if need be. It's jammed in there. Like, yeah, I can't get this off of there. Therefore, it definitely needs to get shortened. Some people speculated that the leaf springs might have been flipped around and that they're asymmetrical. So I've taken some measurements and I will share them with you now, and they're not asymmetrical. In fact, going from the center bolt here up to this bolt comes out to, well, I'd say a shade over 31.5, maybe 31.75. And then coming in from this side. And remember, when you're looking at this measurement, you have to go to the side of the bolt because I had the tape measure hooked over the top of the bolt. So really it's right on this edge of the bolt over here. And now I'll check the other side and same thing. It's just a shade over 31.5, and you can see where I've got this on the side of the bolt. Oops. That hooked around the side of the bolt like that. So it's probably 31.5 if I go to the center of this. And coming in from this way, this one's easier to read. Yeah, they all seem to be just a shade over 31.5. Now I talked to the guy at McGoy's. I've been saying that wrong this whole time. So they answered the phone McGoy's, not McGaffey's.
Sorry guys. He was telling me he has never removed a drive shaft when he installed one of these kits, and he's installed hundreds of these kits, and I have no doubt about that. I mean, I took the leaf springs, I took the differential, I took everything out, and that changed things. Now, what he said is if you do have noise, like I have on this one, is to put a 2-degree shim back here, and that seems to cure the problem. And I think what that's doing is that's changing the pinion angle up, so there's less stress from this drive shaft, which is, I believe, a bit too long. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to have this shortened, but I'm going to put this to you, the viewers. Anybody that's lowered their truck, I want to know if you're able to get your drive shaft out now that you've lowered it, now that this whole assembly is sitting up in a different spot inside the chassis. I'm wondering if this is a common issue or not. I don't know, but like I said, the guy at McGoy's, he never disconnected a drive shaft or anything. He just changed his shackles and did what he did. I suspect that by nature, when you lower your truck, there could very well be an issue with the drive shaft similar to what I'm dealing with here. If nothing else, you'll find out if you go to remove a transmission or just to take a drive shaft out for whatever reason. But if you can, let me know down in the comments if you've lowered your truck and if you are still able to remove your drive shaft. Some mentioned in the comments that I could get a different yoke or I could cut my yoke shorter. That's not the problem. It's where the output shaft of the transmission is bottoming out inside of this yoke that's the issue. So I can make this yoke shorter all day long, but that's not going to solve the issue because this thing is jammed all the way up against the output shaft inside here. So that's really not going to do anything to change the effective length of the drive shaft. By my estimation, since this is bottomed out, I believe that this drive shaft is sitting as far back as it can possibly sit. By my estimation, if I take about 1 3/4 inches out of this drive shaft, it will give me enough slack, if you will, to remove this drive shaft and put it back in. But that's kind of what I'm seeing. So right where it sits right now is bottomed out. If I just move it forward, or if I shorten it by that 1 3/4 inches, I think that's what's going to get me where I want to be. Another thing that came up a lot in the comments was after driving the truck around for a while that the suspension would settle, and it might actually settle into that 4-inch drop that was advertised. Initially this right rear was 34 1/4. After the drop, the first time was 34 3/4. I would say it's just under 31 1/2. Might be better to say 31 3/8, which is less than the 31 3/4. So it has settled. It just occurred to me that I also loosened all the bolts and the spring shackles and everything and then torqued everything on the ground. That may have something to do with it also because I tightened everything while it was up in the air. So that may have been bound up when I did that initial measurement. So that may have something to do with this also. All right, left side last time was 31 1/2 and we're just under that. Once again, it looks like 31 3/8. So it's the same on both sides, which is encouraging to me. Still, if it starts out at 34 1/4 inches and you're coming down around 31 inches, that's not 4 inches. But I'm still happy with the way it looks. But as far as the as advertised 4-inch drop, I'm not quite seeing that. Some might ask the question, hey Eric, didn't your new wheels come with centering rings? And yes, they did. They came with these centering rings. One problem, you can't use them with these hubs. So they won't go down in with these centers in here now. They do without them and they'll be fine. But the second you go to put them in, they won't work. This really doesn't bother me so much because my lug nuts are conical, so they have this cone shape on the end. And as long as you don't run them all, like the first one down all the way, you can center it up with these conical lug nuts because that's how this whole thing is designed. It can center up on the lugs is what I call this, but I kind of have no choice in this case.
Well, viewers, I hope that cleared up some of the confusion or concerns that you might have had when you were watching the other videos with rear disc brake conversion and any of the other work that I did back here, the lowering of the suspension and all of that. But I'm sure at the front of your mind is one big question, which is what the heck is that noise? Well, I have a theory on that, and I think it's the pinion bearings. And I think the reason the pinion bearings are making that noise is because the drive shaft is a little too long and it stresses out that differential, you'll notice when I accelerated, that front of that pinion would come up like this, and then as I decelerated, it would come down like this, and then you'd hear the noise. Well, when it comes down like this, the drive shaft, I think, is pushing on that yoke in the front of the pinion, and as a result, causing those bearings to make some noise. My plan to fix this is to take the drive shaft to a drive shaft place and have them shorten it for me by about 1 3/4 inches. Then I'll reinstall it, take it out on a drive, and if I don't hear the noise anymore, I'll know that my theory was correct. If I do still hear the noise, then I've got some more work to do, and I'll probably have to go in there and see if I can find out what's causing it. Unfortunately, we're going to have to wait a bit before that happens because that drive shaft won't be going back in or coming out until I pull the engine and transmission. So it's going to be a bit before things go back together and we can test this, but for now, I hope this clears up some of those things and also gives you some insight into if you're lowering your vehicle, you may very well have to deal with this drive shaft issue or pinion angle problems. I'll keep you updated on that as the series goes along. I'll also put links in the description to tools and other things, additional videos and additional information, so if you have questions, please check the description. If you have automotive questions not covered in this video, I ask that you head to EricTheCarGuy.com, also linked in the description. And please don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe and do all those things that help make a living. Also watch the videos, hit notifications, do all that stuff. I really appreciate that. Thank you. Be safe, have fun, stay dirty. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time.